Pinkies, and welcome back to episode 2 of the Forgotten Ones. Now, if you're new around here, a few months ago now, I started a series called the Forgotten Ones, and that was about using supplies that I have had for years and years and that I hadn't touched for a really long time. Now, the Forgotten Ones started off with the jelly plate, and as you've seen, I've used the jelly plate quite a lot in videos and just in general, so it helped spark a renewed love for it. I also purchased a smaller one. I enjoyed it that much, so it's rediscovering things that I used to use a lot when I first started mixed media, and either deciding whether I still loved them and wanted to keep them around, or whether it was time to let them move on in my stash. So there has been a lot of chat about this supply in particular, and that would be the Caran d'Ache Neocolour 2s. And essentially these are water soluble wax crayons. They say wax pastel, but they are a crayon in my eyes. I call them watercolor crayons, always have. Now, I have had mine for over 7 years. This was one of the very first supplies I saved up for, as well as my Prismacolor pencils. They were the two items that I saved for months for, and I think I bought the 40 tin and I had to get them imported over from America, because at that stage the mixed media world was nowhere near as huge and as prominent in Australia as it is today. And so the supplies that you guys could get easily, my mum and I would have to find ways to get it to us, and they weren't cheap, and they still are not cheap. So as you can see, I've got mine in like a little Muji box. They've been in various boxes over their lives. I never kept them in the tin because life's too short to keep your stuff in its packaging. And as you can see, I've got broken ones. They do look a lot worse for wear, and I used these a lot. They were one of my main supply that I used, obviously because I didn't have very much when I first started getting back into art and finding my creativity again. I have created most of my life, but there was a huge chunk of my life where I didn't create anything at all, and that was due to my circumstances and in a really bad place in my marriage, not this one, my previous marriage, and so I stopped creating altogether. So this was kind of when I was finding my feet again, and I remember Mum sending me the link to a Susie Blue video, and she's like, this is who you are, this is who you've always been, but you've forgotten where she is. And that video sparked this entire rebirth of my creativity, and I should probably do a video on that sort of feeling of going from doing absolutely nothing to finding your feet again. So here are my Neocolors. They are pretty battered, but I guess battered supplies within reason means that you're actually using them and loving them. Now, before this video, the last time I used these properly, not just a one-off, I honestly couldn't tell you. I know I did a character for one little thing using them, and whoop, let me see, is that in here? Yeah, here. And you can tell from here that I had a stack of trouble with them because I had forgotten how to use them properly, like the way that I loved using them back in the day. And so I hated this, and it was because I had stopped drawing Nook Dwellers, or I hadn't drawn them very often, which is sad because they are one of the cornerstones of my portfolio. My Nook Dwellers are something that I'm known for, and I had stopped drawing them, and so I was really sad that I had done that. I'm gonna grab my sewing book in a minute and show you some of the Nook Dwellers that I have created using these guys, and a little bit of white paint or some gesso. So I'll go grab that now. Hopefully they're in there because I have had to tear a few pages out 4 collage sheets, so get it. Okay, and also I apologize for not being at my normal desk, even though this is essentially my normal desk. I'm actually at the end of the house in my normal studio because hubby is home with man flu and he's on death row apparently, and he's making a whole lot of disgusting, horrible, snotty sounds up the other end of the house, and I was not letting you guys be having to hear that grossness. So I thought I'd just set up down here and away we go. So these back here in this little area here is actually gesso with the crayons laid on top. So I'm going to do that in my journal. I haven't actually tested how gesso and stuff works on my journal pages, so we'll give it a go. But that is one of the most popular ways to use it, and that is so that you help break down that waxy feel. I know a lot of people were talking about how the wax, I guess if you use them as is, if you don't put anything else into them, it does leave a waxy residue. They're crayons, that's normal. But I think the gesso helps. As you can see, I've written on mine, but I think the gesso helps break down that wax feeling. So we'll give it a go and see how we go and see if we can write over them again. So let's find some of my creatures. I should have tabbed them and been way more organized. Again, these are the crayons in here. They were used a lot in my journal for background makers. They were really, I used that a lot actually. Find some of my creatures. I know they're around here somewhere. They're all on tip-ins. Here we go. So this guy was done using the crayons, and I can definitely feel that sort of crayony feel. These guys, pretty sure this one was the crayon. This one here, one of my absolute favorites. I've actually considered taking him out and popping him into my actual journal. I think I may very well do that. I might take him out later. I love him and I want him into my normal journal. No, this one's just paint. But as you can see, I use them quite a lot in my older stuff. And I just sort of, obviously, as I've collected more art supplies, they have kind of gone by the wayside. Whoop, careful. And I thought, why not do a video on them, since you guys have been chatting so much about them and whether you like them or love them, or whether you've had them as well. You've maybe bought them years and years ago or just recently come into them, and don't want to know whether it's worth spending the money. I think the 40 set gives you a really good amount of colors. I looked at the 84 set online and they're still around the $257 mark, I think was what I saw on eBay. There's probably cheaper places to buy it, but they are something that you really need to think about because it's quite expensive. Like, even, you know, and back in the day when I purchased mine, I thought, holy heck, I'm spending all this money on art supplies. You know, you're always doubting whether you're worth it, whether your artwork is worth using expensive supplies. Believe me, we all go through that feeling. I still go through that feeling on a day-to-day basis. So I've already filmed some of this video because this is the intro. I've done some of the creating already, but I'm not going to show all that yet. I am going to lay down some gesso on here, I think. Yeah, I think that's where I'll pop it. Is there any more blank spots? I've just got the Jane Davenport gesso because it was close by and I didn't want to get out my huge pot. My gesso brush is a bit mangled. See if I can, because I was painting a ruler last night for my son's costume and I should have put my paintbrush into into the water beforehand. So what I might do is I'll gesso this page and show you how gesso helps push the watercolors and make it easier to break down the wax, and also show you the difference on a plain page, because the gesso helps make the surface more movable. Even though Tomoe River paper has a coating on it, I think the crayons will still leave a mark, but gesso, you know how we talked about Tombos, how you could layer them down and you'd still see the original mark. These crayons have the same properties, so you will see that. I should probably go easy on the gesso before I run out and then I don't have anything for design team videos. The gesso helps stop that from happening and gives it a surface like a slip and slide almost. That slippery slide feeling, and they move a lot better. They spread a lot more. You use less product, less crayon this way. And also, I'm pretty sure it's either the gesso helps, train of thought. The gesso helps break down that wax, but I think that may be only if you mix them together almost to create like a pastel paint. You'll see in the creature creation part of this video how I use gesso to mix my colors and to soften them and to shade with them and stuff like that, which is how I originally used these back in the day. That's what I did. I used them in conjunction, so as a partner I always had either white paint or gesso to help with the mixing, and a lot of mixed media artists do the same thing. I know Willowing, she is renowned for using these, and I still think, I haven't seen any of her newer stuff, but I'm pretty sure she still uses these to this day, and she always has a Dale Rowney white paint with these because she always uses them as a way to soften the edges, to help blend them, to help layer them, and I think that's probably the best way that I like to use them as well, and it's the way that I used to do it back in the day. So I'm going to go and dry this, and then I'm going to lay down some of this color. I actually need to go get a watercolor brush because they're all in the other room. And then I will show you how they work over gesso, and then I'll show you how they work over just plain paper. Yeah, but they're great background makers, but even though I say that, they're fantastic great background makers, they're expensive for a background maker. So you need to decide whether you're going to get your money's worth out of these tools, or whether they look nice but I can't see me using them in all different aspects. I can only see them as making pretty backgrounds, and I can guarantee you've already got something in your arsenal that you can make pretty backgrounds with without forking out a buttload of cash for these. Okay, that's all dry now. I'm not sure I like the way it changes the feeling of the Tomoe River paper. The gesso changes, I don't know, it dulls down the crinkle. Look, it makes it a little bit heavier so the crinkle goes away. Don't know if I'm a fan of that. So let's just play with colors that I know work together, so we're not going to create mud. And sometimes these are very forgiving. I like that you can just sort of play and not have to worry too much. It'll look pretty regardless. Let's put some yellow in there. Right. As you can see, they instantly break down and move about with no issues whatsoever. And the gesso is helping break that down and not having those original lines. It's creating, like I said, a slip and slide motion. Bring some mud over to the yellow, why don't you, Courtney? Oh, graphic tissue paper. Story of my life. Okay. So let's get some over here. Oh, my breaking left, right, and center, aren't they? Nope, that bit didn't dry. That's all right. They do move quite well as well with your finger. I know Tisha Moore, who before she had her stroke was using these to outline some of her collage elements, like tracing around them and then using her fingers to sort of push them around. And that looked really lovely. She also uses pan pastels for the same type of reason. So let's just put some, can you see my book? Yeah, put some down here. And they do move a little bit with a bit of friction, and you can sort of push them around and get like a shadowing effect as well if you wanted that, if that's something that you needed in your journal. And you can see that you can't see that original mark anymore. Now, if I was to do, say, the same thing on a non-gessoed page, so let me move this out of the way, and I will grab this journal. I do have my heat gun here, but I'll heat gun them in a minute. And we'll come back here. Same sort of pressure. You can see that I'm not doing anything differently. This may work a bit better because it's on a watercolor paper, if you're on, like, say, computer paper or something like that, but most supplies don't move at all on computer paper. But you can see that with your non-prepped page, that you can see that original mark there. Pull that up so you can see that I have slapped a whole stack of water on them, and they are still showing that original mark, which in my opinion I don't like. So I normally use them with gesso and with or white paint and stuff like that. You can make them more opaque by using a little bit of gesso. I won't use my watercolor brush because little tiny IKEA brush to the rescue. So you can definitely move it around and make it more like a paint. So there's always that option. They are very versatile. They can look like watercolor, or you can add some white paint or some gesso, and you almost have a gouache effect as well. You're adding more water, you can move them around, and again, you can't see those original markings with the gesso. The gesso just seems to help it along. Another way you can use them, let me dry my page and I will show you that. Okay, so that's all dry. Let's be quick so we can actually I can get into some actual creating with them, not just showing you bits and pieces. This is on a non-prepped surface. So this is just straight into my journal. Now, this could very well be because a Tomoe River paper has that slickness, but you can see that without the gesso, they are very muted, they're very watercolory. With the gesso, they are a lot brighter. The gesso lets the pigment sit on top, whereas here the pigment is seeping down into the page. Now, another way you can use them, and a way that I do use quite often when I'm actually using them, I make it sound like I use them every day, but we all know that's not true, because this is the reason. Now, you will see me do this in the video, but I thought I'd show you it as something. You can definitely get your palettes, get your whatever palette you want to use. I've used in the video, and here you can break it down and then you have actual watercolor. If you don't want to risk getting that line and you just want a watercolor, you can definitely just scribble down onto your palette surface, get some of the pigment off the actual crayon and onto that, and then break it down with water. And obviously you can use them exactly the way that you would use watercolor, and they are beautiful, and they are very soft and lovely this way. So if you're into pastels, this is a great way for you to get that pastel-y look. Let's get some yellow. I also really love doing this by like scraping them down onto a craft mat and then spraying them, and then using them almost like dragging my page through them. And I will actually do that for you guys as well, so you can see, because I did used to do that back in the day. They are a very versatile little supply, so if you have them and you haven't used them, think about using them in this sort of way, because you can get some beautiful effects with them, and they do brighten up a bit. So you can see there that they're a little bit brighter. They're obviously more muted doing it this way by breaking them down first, but if you want soft and subtle, this is definitely the way to go about it. And it also means that no matter what sort of surface you've got, whether it be a Tomo River paper notebook or a plain paper one. So what I might do is I'll grab a piece of computer paper and I'll show you that technique on the computer paper, as opposed to putting the lines down first. Okay, so we've got computer paper, which is like the crappiest paper in the world for all the art supplies, because everything just sits, as you can see. How these move on computer paper. Not too bad, not too bad. I do feel like the you get more pigment on the computer paper, and I don't know if that's because of how much, see how when we put that down on, say, the watercolor paper, see, you can see a little bit of the original mark. Not, maybe it's only some colors will give you that, or it depends on if, say, we did it really lightly. Let's do a really light super fairy touch. So that's all done very lightly. Let me just even with fairy touches, you can still see that original breakdown. Now, obviously with that bit being wet, there's more pigment coming out than before, and you can do that as well. Put wet on wet. Yep, works just fine. It's a little bit less bright, but still. The other thing you can do is you can literally paint, put brush. This is probably like common knowledge. If you only want a little bit but you want to pack a punch, you can definitely come in and paint straight from the tip and get full impact of your pigment. And I do that a lot as well when I'm trying to do cheeks and things and I want a bit of poppiness. Definitely do that. So, with that being said, I think they are fabulous. I feel like they have sat in my drawer for quite a few years, and that's purely because I got so many different other supplies and sort of didn't value them enough. But after doing quite a few Nook dwellers again on tags and things for myself and for collage sheets, I have fallen back in love with these. Don't think this video is a promotion for you or permission slip for you to go and get them. You need to decide within yourself, can I make these work in my art life? Do I need them? Do I have something already in my arsenal that can do all the things that these can do? How can I use them in more ways than one so that I can get more bang for my buck? There's that. So I'm going to get my craft mat, I'm going to scribble some down, then I'm going to spray them, and then I'm going to drag some pages through that. Maybe not my journal, because my journal, the beast is getting way too heavy to drag through things. But I'll see what I can do, and then I will create a few little bits and pieces for my journal, although we are going to see how it goes with writing over the top, because there's no point making pretty backgrounds in your journal if you cannot write on them. All right, first up, I am going to try, and this is how much I love you, I am going to write with my Tiki graphic, because I want to know as well, if one of my favorite pens, I'm not going to try with my fountain pen, because a $6 pen I can cope with losing, a $100 fountain pen I cannot. And I don't have a fountain pen that I would be willing to risk at the moment, but you know, not all of us write with fountain pens, so let's have a look. I'm just feeling it. Feeling it. I think ballpoint pens would probably be the best to write over. This feels wet still, but it's okay. So what I might do is I'll draw, because I don't want to write anything, but I can that's just because I'm not in the mood, but I can definitely try and draw something. And as you can see, there's no skipping yet. Give it time to decide whether it wants to skip. So far so good. Okay, so in the areas, let me zoom in here. In the areas that have a lot of pigment, so in here, it's still, the wax hasn't been broken down enough, and you can see here and here and here there's enough gesso to do its thing, right? Get in here and it will work, but I think that's because my pen is more inky. Let's try over here. Okay, so where your pigment hasn't broken down enough is going to be where you're going to have trouble writing over this sort of stuff. But if you use a gesso or a white paint or something to help break down that wax, you are definitely going to be able to write over it, draw over it, all that sort of jazz. So let's go to here where there is nothing at all. So there is just the paper and the watercolor that's been broken down. I'm pretty sure that's where we did these. Yep. So no issues at all. This just feels like normal paper. Like you can't feel any waxiness whatsoever, and obviously my pen is not having any issues at all writing over them. So if you want to put your watercolors onto a palette and then break them down by that way, that means that you're fully breaking them down, so all that you've got left is the watercolor not the actual wax base, because the water has dispersed that enough. But obviously if you were putting it down and not really breaking it down at all, I will actually pick up one of my get one of my old faithfuls. This is the Unipin Fine Line. So let's go back to this like Tombow test page, and we won't break it down heaps. We'll just break it down a little bit, okay? So you can, if I put my finger over that, you can feel the wax. There's no way anything's gonna go over that, short of like a Stabilo pencil, because that thing goes over everything. So let's get in here and break it down a little bit. So that's not spreading it, that's keeping it super, super concentrated. Now I'm gonna dry it and then we're gonna try to draw over it. All right, let's just double check that this pen hasn't dried up and isn't, I'm not like, right, that one's fine. Can't feel the waxiness anymore. As long as you break it down with some form of water, you are going to be just fine. But make sure you can see, draw, 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 draw. It's even, so up here, you can see that this portion has not broken down enough and still has a waxy residue. And instantly, that has stuffed my nib. Get that wax off my nib and we're almost back in business. So as long as you break it down with your water or your gesso, you will be able to work over the top with your normal pens. So don't fear about the fact, I know that was a big issue with a lot of people. As long as you break it down enough with your mediums and get rid of that waxy residue, so you're breaking it down, you're getting rid of the wax, you'll be fine. Absolutely fine. And I have just showed you that in real life, that you can, as long as you break it down or use a watercolor, not a watercolor, gesso or something like that, if you're still a bit stressed about doing it the other way. So let's get to some creating some creatures with my favorite supply, the original supply that I created my Nook Dwellers with all the way back then. I have re-fallen in love with one, my Nook Dwellers for one, and the crayons. So they will be staying in my supply chest and arsenal. And I even looked at purchasing the 84, but I think that these are just fine for now. I will also do the drag through for you guys, but I will speed that up because I've talked a little bit and I've just checked the time and I need to go see my kids at the book parade with my husband. They're all dressed up today, so I thought I'll go do that and then I'll come back and create a few bits and bobs with you. So, do you own these? Have you been on the fence about these? Let's have a chat. I know there was a lot of, stir about them recently. I don't know why they suddenly came to light when I had been thinking of doing a Forgotten Ones video on these guys. So tell me, show me what you've been working on. Show me what you've made with these. If you're in the Facebook group, pop up something. I might put a photograph of these and then you can put, what you've used these on. I know I asked Romany if she had actually used many of hers because I know she's owned them as well. Probably as long, if not longer than I have. So I wanted to know if she still used them. Being an OG mixed media girl, and hers are in the cutest coffin box. So damn cute. I'm slightly jealous of the coffin box. My little Muji case fish and tackle box will have to do. So let me know what you're creating with them. What have you used them with? Do you write over them? Have you been scared to write over them and ruin a pen? The things I do for you guys, my loves, the things I do. So I am going to go get all myself ready to go see my teacup humans, and then we're going to pop back here and make some fun things. So because the Project Life cards are flimsy as F and don't cope with all the water, I've dried it and this is kind of what it looks like. It's all warpy and stuff. I'm going to drag the gessoed one through as well. And then I've got some watercolor card on the side. So you can see where the gesso is, it holds really well. And then you can see on the other side where the gesso is not. You can see definitely there. But they will make for some cool cards. I'm going to let them dry naturally. I'm going to drag, add some more color to over here. Whoop. Everyone's cringing, I know. Oh, you broke it. When you've had something this long, it's okay. So they're not picking up as nicely as I wanted to, but you can get some pretty cool effects. I personally think I like the gesso more because it gives that slip and slide effect. Has that one been gessoed? No, this one has. Oh, even that's not. I think once they get diluted down too much, they don't pick up as much pigment. So I do really like how it looked originally though, and that's with very close. So let's grab one more of the gesso cards. Yeah, that one's been gessoed. And let's this looks so much brighter because it's sinking right into the card. It's not sitting on top of the gesso. But yeah, you can get some pretty cool effects using this drag technique and just dragging it through your craft mat and stuff like that. That is also a lot of fun, and these will get turned into the backgrounds of some other something or other tip in Central. But let's get on to using them with my Nook Dwellers. So let's get started. Now I've picked a few bits and pieces out of my stash, and when I go to create Nook Dwellers, especially in this kind of format, I always pick very neutral-ish things to lay down. Now the one that I did for the One Little Thing series, I had mentioned even in that video that it didn't feel quite right, because normally I used to, when I first started making them, was I layered them over back collage backgrounds. They had things underneath them, and it was the peeking words and the little bits of collage fodder that you saw peeking through their bodies that made them, that gave them a soul almost. And so the one that I did in that video didn't have that. I just literally created it on top of a blank piece of watercolor paper, and I didn't love it, and I still don't love it. So I decided to go back to basics and go back to the beginning, and I have grabbed out a whole heap of neutral elements. So things that don't have a huge pattern, and if I do pick a pattern, so you can see that there's some not washi tape, the tissue paper with the polka dots and a few little red bits and pieces. I kind of group group them in the center, knowing that I will actually be doing almost like a block out technique and using those collage elements as their clothing. But when I want to do the face and things, I normally rely on vintage papers and things like that. So you can see on the card there that the top bit has some black and white line work, but the rest of the paper is literally just cream. And so that's where I always like to have a little bit of something extra. Now I've just pulled out my Stabilo pencil, and now I know I wasn't using this back in the day because I've only just discovered it, or I haven't had it in my collection that long, but I did use a really hard colored or soft colored graphite pencils. So the 6Bs and stuff like that was what I used to create them with. Now if you've watched the face shading video, you will notice that I am doing all the same sort of things, putting all the dark shades in the dark places and the light in the light. And it is all the same. I keep things very simple with my little creatures, and I make sure that I am putting in the white highlights in the right places. And you'll see that it does take me quite a while to get to a desired effect, and that's purely because the whole process is all about layering and getting the right mix of shadow and light and the right mix of all those little places, and trying to figure out what you like best. So trying to get it done in one and done in like 5 seconds flat, it's not going to work. I play and play and play, adding my gesso to sort of turn the watercolor into a paint, and you can see that that's what I'm moving it around. So I've got a little bit of water on my brush. It's not too wet, but the gesso is definitely helping break down that crayon. And then I'm going around the edges with the Stabilo to give that sort of dark shadow, and then I keep adding in the darks when I think I am happy, and then move a bit more in. And you can see I'm using those more fancier elements, the more patterned elements, as part of the outfit, and I've just drawn literally around there. And then I'm making sure I come in with a solid color like the yellow to distinguish the fact that the clothing is a different shade. So I am using that sort of semi block out technique that you guys know that I'm known for, and just sort of making that a whole element around so that the dress becomes part of its own. And I am not adding any gesso to the outside. This is literally just the crayon and some water, so like a watercolor. And I just keep defining, keep layering, putting the colors in the shadows, and just keep on keeping on until I'm happy. And it does take a while to get somewhere that you really love. And when I'm letting things dry a little bit, I will work on the outside, adding in the gesso around the forehead and the nose where the light hits the most, and just trying to find the balance with all that shadowing without it looking just slapped on. There is a fine line between the gradients, so trying to get that perfect shade in the gradient is what I'm trying to go for, and that's why it takes me a lot of layering too. And you can build up those colors by layering over the top and over the top and over the top, and that's what I tend to do. And you can see there that I've just scraped that into the porcelain palette like I showed you guys to begin with, and that's when I don't want a really bright color. I just want a really soft color, and so it's one of my favorite ways to actually use them, is to just break them down in a palette. So yeah. I am coming in with a white gel pen. You guys know the Uniball Signo in the broad and the not broad are my two favorite gel pens, and sometimes I just need to get those like catch lights in there to make it feel like it's going somewhere. And I've added a bit too much water there, so I am just mopping that up a little bit, adding more layers of the yellow to really pop, and so that the dress element looks very stark against. I am adding some gesso in there just to add a bit of texture and things, to get a little bit of different levels of the yellow. And I kind of love how they turn into almost like a pastel paint when you add the gesso, or a white paint. Again, going back into those same areas around the eyes, around the forehead, and just getting that beautiful gradient shade that takes forever. Using your fingers is also a great way, because it adds a softness that a paintbrush sometimes takes a little bit longer to get. and adding white gesso into those cheeks so that they're not so in your face. So it's very subtle. With my little Nook Dwellers, it is all super subtle, and just trying to get that softness in there because they're forlorn little creatures and there's nothing in your face about them. They just sort of come to life and exist in the silent moments. They live in the nooks. That's where they got their name. They live in the nooks of your life and the nooks of your journals, and they protect the secret things, and that's how they came to be what they came to be. That's why they were called Nook Dwellers, because they dwell in the nooks of your life. And I love them. I very muchly love them, and creating these for you guys and rediscovering my love for these crayons, and also the love for my little creatures, has been an awesome gift. I remember the day that I made this, I was just smiling, and hubby was like, what's wrong? You know, you're pretty happy and happy. And it's like, oh, I just rediscovered an old friend is all. Rediscovered an old friend. This is a watercolor pencil, and like I said, you can come in and get other mediums to help, because we're using that gesso. Like I explained at the start of this video, we're breaking down that wax barrier. So other mediums will have a lot more easy time. I didn't like where the eyebrows were going, so I got rid of them. That's the beauty of the Stabilo. So now I have to rework on those shadows because I didn't like where I put those eyebrows, and I'm just working at it and working at it. Nothing is set in stone. You can always layer over it and keep going, keep trucking. Nothing's ever wrecked, and definitely not when you've got a paintbrush full of gesso. Everything can be undone if you want it to. But I do think I add eyebrows in the end, but I think I just put them too far up, and he just lost that sort of innocent look, and I didn't want him to lose that because I was loving where he was going. So I've added a little bit of orange to the nose and the cheeks. No hot pink in this one, but I do really love the orange for the cheeks and the nose. And I love how I think I've almost got that little facial feature, and that is him done. And now I'm coming in with some of my Prismacolor pencils because the wax has actually been dissolved almost with the gesso, so they do play very well with Prismacolor pencils, and sometimes I feel like I get more control with those. So there I am just coming in with a dark blue pencil to get those shadows in that I was having a little bit of trouble getting beforehand. So they do play well with others, especially the Prismacolor pencils, and it makes me smile to think that because they were my two OGs. I do add a little bit of the neon pink pencil just to add a little something. And moving along, I decided that I was totally in love with that little guy. Since he was done, I had an urge to create another one. Now you don't actually get to see the entirety of this one because I ran out of camera battery, and I saw the time and was like, oh my goodness, I haven't cooked dinner and everyone's going to be starving. So this one was just, I thought I'd turn the camera on anyway because I was going to create something else, and I was going to put it in a creative week one, but I am using the crayons in this, so I thought why not pop this little bit of footage in as well. I'm not going to go through explaining everything again because it's the same sort of steps, but the beauty is that this little creature looks completely different. I did try and apply my illustration style to this one to see if I liked it, and I'm not sure I do, but I know some people would prefer the look of this little creature. You'll see it finished at the end of this video than the one that I just finished. It's all personal preference, and I like that I was starting to experiment with them, and I think there's a lot more busy prints going in this one and not quite as much neutral, and I think that's where it went wrong as well. So I was just trying to find bits and pieces in my ephemera pouch to lay down, odds and ends that have just been floating around that needed a home, and collage sheet elements, you name it, tissue paper, magazine cutouts. I think there's an army of odd head that didn't actually make it into the army, it was just a blob in my pencil case. And so yeah, anything is possible with these little loves. They are so forgiving, and even though I'm not completely in love with this one, it doesn't matter. She's got her place, and I know that one of you guys or all of you guys will adore her and adopt her, and she will guard the pages of your journals, and that is what they're there for. That's how I see them. That's how I've always seen them, as guardians of our secrets. So I know that you guys will
give them loving homes, and I will I know that they'll be very, very honored to guard the pages of your journal. So I will let this one play out with some music, and I will talk to you at the end of the video.
So as you can see, these babies do have a very versatile range of how they can be used, how they can be manipulated, how they work well with other mediums, and I really do love them. And it was a shame that they spent so long underneath my desk in a little container when they are one of my very first loves when it comes to mixed media, and they will be kept out. This video has reminded me that I do absolutely adore my Nook dwellers. I adore making them, and it has been such a long time since I have sat down and actually made these little guys. So I can see a lot of these little things in my future, mainly because they are such a calming thing for me to make. And even though it's been a long time since I've made them, I can autopilot them and be so simply happy. I can do all the collaging bits at the desk and then sit down on the floor with a little bit of these, a tube of gesso or some white paint and a paintbrush, and just sit there and happily paint away until I have found my desired effect. This one I didn't capture on camera. I literally was just arting it out at my desk, and they will get scanned and they will be in your collage sheet, so you can adopt these little beauties next month. Although they weren't made in order for collage sheets, they're just something that I love to make. And I think I'll be making a couple more as well as these three guys, because I really did enjoy just sitting back and creating these little guys all over again. They kind of started the pathway for me. They are such a symbol of me. And the other little one that I always love is here as well. These little creatures are very near and dear to my heart, and they are like my little spirit guides that help me along the way. And I am truly excited about not inventing them, but rediscovering them. Especially since the stuff that's been happening on YouTube has not been all that awesome. Creating these guys was definitely my way of just arting it out. And I always tell you guys that if you are feeling not so awesome and that little dark hole is getting deeper and darker and bigger, art it out, guys. Definitely art it out. And I was making these during that whole period where I was feeling a whole heap of nasty, and these guys made me feel happy again. So definitely art is such a fantastic tool for so many different reasons, and especially these little guys. They are so near and dear to my heart. So again, I want to see what you have created with your Neocolour 2s. Has this video made you go, maybe I do need to put some in my stash of tools? And it's amazing that I feel like I've come full circle. Obviously my Prismacolor pencils, I've been using them since I bought them, and I love them and haven't stopped using them, but this was definitely one of those OG supplies that I did stop using, and that was purely because I had stopped doing heaps of mixed media and was focusing on more watercolor and drawing, but now I'm slowly incorporating it all back into my life, especially with collage, and it's all just slowly finding its way into my repertoire again. So I hope you enjoyed this quick little, well, it wasn't quick, but this video on the Forgotten Ones with the Caran d'Ache Neocolour 2s. I can't wait to see what the discussion, how the discussion goes with these, whether you've got them, whether you don't have them. Do you think they're a worthy supply to purchase? Can you see you using them in more than one way? Obviously, there's probably so many more ways to use these that I haven't even touched on. I just gave you the main ones that I use them for and how I go about using them in my artwork once upon a time, and apparently now again. So these videos always are awesome because it makes me realize the stuff that I have around me, and then that whole year of use thing plays in my head and using what I have, and maybe these guys will make it into the monthly documentation. You'll definitely know if I keep using them. They have to be used more than just a few times to make it into that video, and so far I can see myself becoming re-obsessed with creating these little guys for tip-ins. I loved these in my sewing book journal and how they were just tipped onto index cards. These are Project Life cards, and because you saw that the Project Life cards are not all that, I swear they were more well made like when they first started, and now they're just really, really flimsy. But if I was to collage these down, which is what you saw me do with these. You didn't see me finish this girl because I ran out of light and camera battery, but you saw the beginning of her and how she changed completely. She went through a lot of ugly stages, and even now I'm not completely in love with her, but she's got her place in my journal for sure. But you can definitely see how different they are with a little bit of collage. There's nowhere near as much buckle, and obviously I've used a stack of wet medium on these to get these to where they are, but the collage ephemera is definitely something that helps give that stability. With my older ones, they were on watercolor paper, they were on index cards mainly, and sometimes these, but I might pull out my old index cards and give them a use. Year of use, babies, year of use. So that is it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a comment down below or in the Facebook group. I will put a picture of mine in the Facebook group, and that will become the discussion thread for how you've used them. Please share, please chat. We all bounce ideas off each other and get inspiration from each other, in that group especially. And I may make a couple more of these on camera. You might see a few pop up in a Creative Week video. You may see one pop up on YouTube if I decide to do a YouTube video on these guys. And I actually am going to do one with Jane's mermaid markers and the gesso of hers, because this little guy has mermaid marker and gesso. That's why she's a bit more vibrant. So I thought that would be a lesson for them to have as well. So that's enough talking. I need to go take care of my hubby, who is on death row with his man flu, and I think it's almost time to pick up my kids. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Forgotten Ones, and I can't wait to hear all the answers about these little forgotten babies that are now have a whole new lease on life in my studio. So take care, my loves. Bye.